My name's Jake, and I'm 29. Amanda, my wife, or the woman I thought was the love of my life, is 27. I met her when I was 22, and she was this fiery, magnetic force who walked into my life and turned it upside down in all the best ways. She made every day feel like an adventure. I thought she was my forever. We started dating in college. I remember the moment I fell for her like it was yesterday. Amanda was standing in the middle of the student union, laughing louder than anyone, commanding the room without even trying. Her energy was intoxicating. Everyone loved Amanda, and I couldn't believe she chose me. By the time we were 25, I had the ring and a dream proposal planned. From the outside, we were perfect. But even back then, there were cracks I ignored. Amanda had this, let's call it a flair for exaggeration. She'd lie about little things, what she had for lunch, who texted her. But I brushed it off. I told myself it didn't matter because I loved her. I never thought those lies would grow into something bigger, something that would gut me. Fast forward to our wedding day, June of last year. It was a fairy tale, or at least I wanted it to be. Amanda looked stunning. The ceremony went off without a hitch, and by the time we got to the reception, I was on cloud 9. That's when things started to spiral. The reception was the stuff of Pinterest dreams. String lights, flowing champagne, and Amanda stealing the show like she always did. Our friends and family were having the time of their lives. I should have been too. But something was off. Started small. Amanda was glued to the master of ceremonies, a guy named Ryan. He was the slick, overly confident type who somehow charmed everyone. But I'd noticed during the planning process that he was a little too familiar with her. I brushed it off as professionalism. But on the day of, the way they interacted set my teeth on edge. She laughed a little too hard at his jokes, touched his arm a little too often. Then came the clincher. I couldn't find Amanda when it was time to cut the cake. Guests were asking where the bride was, and I started searching, trying to play it cool. I finally spotted her slipping out the side door of the venue. She wasn't alone. Ryan was right behind her. My stomach dropped, but I followed. When I pushed open the door, I found them in the dimly lit hallway. Her back was to me and Ryan was way too close. He was leaning in, his hand grazing her hip. My world came crashing down in a matter of seconds. "Are you serious right now?" My voice echoed down the hall, stopping them in their tracks. Amanda turned around, her face a mix of guilt and anger, like I was the one ruining her perfect day. "Jake, it's not what it looks like," she snapped, stepping toward me. "Not what it looks like?" I yelled. "You're sneaking off with the MC at our wedding." Ryan had the audacity to smirk, which was all it took for me to lose it. I lunged at him, grabbing his collar. A blur of shouts and scrambling ensued as my brother and a couple of friends dragged me off of him before it could escalate further. The commotion drew a crowd, and now half the wedding guests were gawking. Amanda was yelling at me, calling me crazy, and making me out to be the bad guy. My hands were shaking, part rage, part heartbreak. Amanda eventually stormed off in tears, leaving me standing there humiliated in front of everyone I knew. That was the moment the fantasy shattered, and the cracks I'd ignored turned into gaping chasms. The rest of the night was a blur. Amanda locked herself in the bridal suite, refusing to come out. Meanwhile, I was left to face the guests, half of whom had witnessed the hallway showdown. People whispered, a few tried to comfort me, but mostly, I felt the weight of humiliation crushing me. I couldn't leave. I was the groom after all. But I avoided everyone, sitting in a corner with a whiskey I didn't drink. All I could think about was Amanda's face when I caught her. She didn't look scared or apologetic. She looked angry, like I had done something wrong. When Amanda finally came out, her makeup was smudged, her eyes red, but she acted like nothing had happened. She told everyone the fight was a misunderstanding, and that I was overreacting. She even had the gall to laugh about it, saying, "Ryan and I were just going over last-minute details for the party." Jake's nerves got the better of him. Her lies worked. The guests laughed nervously, and the tension simmered down, but I was still fuming. She didn't even try to talk to me until after the last guest had left. When we were alone in the hotel suite that night, I confronted her again. What the hell was that, Amanda? You and Ryan sneaking off like that? Do you think I'm stupid? She rolled her eyes, already defensive. Jake, you're blowing this out of proportion. Ryan was just making sure everything was running smoothly. I didn't want to argue with you on our wedding day, but now you're being ridiculous. Ridiculous, I snapped. You looked guilty as hell. And he looked like he couldn't wait to get his hands on you. God, you're so insecure, she yelled, throwing up her hands. Do you think I'd ruin our wedding for some random guy? Get over yourself. Her gaslighting hit me like a brick wall. She didn't apologize or even acknowledge how it looked. Instead, she flipped the script, making me feel like I was crazy for doubting her. And the worst part? I let her. We spent the night in icy silence, lying back to back in the bed that was supposed to be the start of our honeymoon. We had planned a dream honeymoon in Hawaii, 2 weeks of paradise to start our new life together. But after the disaster at the reception, the trip felt like a bad joke. Amanda acted as if nothing had happened. She posted smiling selfies of us on Instagram with captions like, "Happily ever after 2 hearts." To anyone watching, we were the picture-perfect newlyweds. But behind the scenes, we were barely speaking. The first few days were tense. I kept bringing up what happened with Ryan, and every time, Amanda shut me down. Why are you so obsessed with this? She snapped during dinner one night. We're married now. Let it go. Let it go? How could I? The image of her with Ryan haunted me. The worst part was that I didn't even have concrete proof she'd done anything. Maybe they didn't kiss, but the sneaking off, the way he touched her, the look on her face, it was enough to make my skin crawl. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I checked her phone while she was in the shower. I didn't want to be that guy, but my gut told me I needed answers. What I found wasn't a smoking gun, but it was enough to set my heart racing. There were text messages between her and Ryan. Ryan, you looked incredible today. Amanda, flattery will get you everywhere, face blowing a kiss. Ryan, too bad we didn't get more time to talk. Amanda, next time, maybe winking faced. I froze. My hands shook as I scrolled. There weren't a ton of messages, but what was there told me everything I needed to know. They had been flirting for weeks leading up to the wedding. When Amanda came out of the bathroom, I was sitting on the bed with her phone in my hand. Her face fell. Jake, what the hell are you doing with my phone? I could ask you the same thing, I said, my voice shaking. I held the screen up to her. What the hell is this? Flattery will get you everywhere? Next time, maybe? What next time, Amanda? Her face went pale, but only for a second. Then the mask came back. Are you seriously going through my phone? That's such an invasion of privacy. Don't turn this around on me, I shouted. Explain the messages. Now. Amanda folded her arms and rolled her eyes. Oh my God, Jake. Ryan and I were just messing around. It's harmless. You're being ridiculous. Harmless. I was practically yelling now. You're flirting with another guy, on our wedding day, no less, and you expect me to believe it's harmless? She didn't apologize. Instead, she doubled down, saying I was insecure and jealous, that I was ruining the honeymoon. We ended up screaming at each other until 2 a.m., and by the end of it, I was more confused than ever. When we got back home, I was a wreck. The honeymoon didn't feel like the start of something beautiful. It felt like the beginning of the end. Amanda, on the other hand, acted like nothing had happened. She dove headfirst into married life, redecorating the apartment and showing off her new status as a wife. It was surreal, like she was trying to gaslight me into believing everything was fine. But I couldn't let it go. Those texts with Ryan replayed in my mind on a loop. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus at work. I kept asking myself, if she can flirt like that before the wedding, what else is she capable of? Then came the moment that nearly broke me. 2 weeks after we got home, I got a call from one of my groomsmen, Mark. He sounded hesitant, almost nervous. Jake, man, I didn't want to say anything at the wedding, but something's been bugging me, he started. What is it? I asked, my stomach nodding. Mark sighed. I overheard Amanda talking to Ryan at the reception. She said something about how she'd miss their little talks and how things would have to change now that you two were married. It sounded, I don't know, off. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Mark wasn't the type to stir up drama. If he was telling me this, it was because he thought I needed to know. That night, I confronted Amanda again. I told her what Mark had said and demanded the truth. Her reaction? She laughed. Actually laughed. Oh my God, Jake. Are you seriously still on this? Mark must have misunderstood. Ryan and I were just friends, and now he's out of the picture. Why can't you let it go? Because you're lying to me, I yelled. You've been lying this whole time. Her face hardened. If you don't trust me, maybe we shouldn't have gotten married. That hit like a slap to the face. For a moment I considered leaving. The apartment, the marriage, everything. I wanted to walk out the door and never look back. But then she broke down. Tears, apologies, the works. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I didn't mean it like that. I just hate how this is ruining us. I love you, Jake. Please don't give up on us. Caved. I wanted to believe her so badly that I let it slide. Again. I told myself we could move past this, that it was just a rough start to our marriage. But deep down, the doubts were still there. For a while, it felt like we were actually making progress. Amanda went out of her way to show she was committed to our marriage. She planned date nights, surprised me with little gestures, and even suggested couples counseling. Something I never thought she'd agree to. I wanted to believe her. I really did. So we started therapy. The sessions were awkward at first, but over time, Amanda seemed to open up. She admitted that she craved attention and validation, but insisted she'd never actually cheat. Flirting doesn't mean anything to me, she said during one session. I know it bothers you, though, and I'm working on it. It was enough to convince me to stay. I told myself that no marriage was perfect, that we'd hit a rough patch early but could come out stronger on the other side. And for a while, life seemed good. Amanda got pregnant about 6 months after the wedding, and that changed everything, at least for me. The moment she told me, I felt this overwhelming sense of purpose. I was going to be a dad. This was our chance to truly start fresh. She seemed excited too, though not as much as I'd expected. She posted the obligatory pregnancy announcement on social media, complete with a glowing caption about how excited we were. But at home, she was more distant. I chalked it up to hormones or the stress of pregnancy, though the doubts still whispered in the back of my mind. When our son, Ethan, was born, I thought we'd finally made it. Holding him for the first time felt like the missing piece of my life had clicked into place. Amanda seemed genuinely happy, too. For a few months, it felt like we were a real family, like everything we'd gone through had been worth it. But then, the cracks started to show again. Ethan was 6 months old when everything came crashing down again. Amanda had been distant for weeks, slipping back into her old habits. She was glued to her phone constantly, brushing off my questions with vague answers like, just catching up with friends. She started going out more often, claiming she needed me time after the stress of being a new mom. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think she'd earned the trust we'd been rebuilding. But late one night, I saw her sitting on the couch, laughing at something on her phone. When she noticed me watching, she immediately locked the screen and put it face down on the table. That was my first real red flag. The second came a week later. She said she was going out with her friend Jessica, but when I texted Jessica to ask what time Amanda would be home, she replied, "Haven't seen her in weeks." Why? My stomach dropped. I didn't confront Amanda right away. Instead, I waited, watching her behavior, looking for anything that might confirm my growing suspicions. And then, one night, I got the confirmation I was dreading. Amanda had fallen asleep with her phone unlocked beside her. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't help myself. I picked it up and opened her messages. There it was, a string of texts with her ex-boyfriend, Kyle. Kyle, you looked amazing tonight. I've missed you. Amanda, I missed you too. I wish we had more time. Kyle, next time we'll make it happen. Can't stop thinking about you. Amanda, me neither face blowing a kiss. The texts went on and on, painting a picture of secret meetings, late-night rendezvous, and a connection she'd been hiding for months. I sat there, staring at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. When Amanda woke up and saw me holding her phone, her face turned to stone. "What are you doing with my phone?" she asked, her voice cold and sharp. I didn't bother answering. I just held up the screen, showing her the messages. "Care to explain this?" For a moment, she said nothing. Then, to my utter disbelief, she laughed. "Oh, come on, Jake. It's not like we did anything serious. We're just catching up." "Catching up?" I yelled. "You're sneaking around with your ex while I'm at home taking care of our son? And you call that catching up? How stupid do you think I am?" "Amanda." She rolled her eyes. "You're overreacting again. Kyle and I have history, but it's harmless. I needed someone to talk to. And you've been so wrapped up in Ethan, you barely notice me anymore." Her words hit me like a slap. She wasn't just admitting to the betrayal. She was blaming me for it. "Don't you dare put this on me," I snapped. "I've been here trying to make this marriage work, trying to be a good father while you sneak around behind my back. Do you even care about us?" Amanda didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed her phone and walked out of the room, slamming the door behind her. After that night, I couldn't look at Amanda the same way. The weight of her betrayal was crushing, but even worse was her refusal to own up to it. She acted like I was the problem for being upset, like her emotional affair, or whatever she wanted to call it, was somehow justified. For days, we barely spoke. I stayed in the guest room, trying to wrap my head around what to do next. Ethan was my anchor during that time. Every time I looked at him, I thought about the life I wanted to give him. A stable home, loving parents. But how could I give him that when his mother was so hell-bent on sabotaging everything? Eventually, Amanda tried to smooth things over. She came into the guest room one night, looking teary-eyed and vulnerable. "Jake," she started softly. "I know I've hurt you. I'm sorry for texting Kyle. It was stupid. I've been feeling lost, and I didn't know how to talk to you about it. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. But I couldn't ignore the patterns." "You've said you're sorry before," I replied. "But nothing changes. You always find a way to lie, to hurt me, and then you expect me to just forgive you." She sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes glistening with tears. "I love you, Jake. I love our family. Please don't throw it all away because of one mistake." I laughed bitterly. "One mistake? This isn't just about Kyle. It's about Ryan. It's about every time you've lied to my face and made me feel like I'm crazy for doubting you." Amanda's tears turned into anger. "You act like you're some perfect saint. Maybe if you paid more attention to me instead of obsessing over the past, I wouldn't have felt so alone." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. There it was again, her way of twisting the knife, making her betrayal my fault. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just stood up, looked her in the eye and said, "I'm done, Amanda. I can't keep living like this." After that conversation, I moved out. It wasn't easy, but I packed a bag and stayed with my brother for a while. I told Amanda I needed space to figure things out, but deep down I knew I was done. I couldn't keep subjecting myself to her lies and manipulation. The hardest part was leaving Ethan. Every time I held him, I felt torn in half. I wanted to take him with me, to shield him from the toxicity of our marriage, but I also knew Amanda was still his mother. No matter how much she hurt me, I couldn't justify ripping him away from her. For a few weeks, I focused on rebuilding myself. I went back to the gym, reconnected with friends, and started seeing a therapist to work through the emotional wreckage Amanda had left behind. For the first time in years, I felt like I was regaining control of my life. Amanda, meanwhile, kept trying to pull me back. She called and texted constantly, oscillating between tearful apologies and bitter accusations. "You're giving up on us," she'd say one day, only to accuse me of abandoning our family the next. It was exhausting. Then, one day, Amanda dropped a bombshell. "I think I'm pregnant," she said over the phone, her voice trembling. I froze. "What?" "I'm late," she continued. "I haven't taken a test yet, but, Jake, if I'm pregnant, this could be our chance to fix things." I didn't know what to say. The idea of another child with Amanda terrified me, but I also couldn't ignore the possibility that she was carrying my baby. I agreed to meet her the next day to talk. When I got to her apartment, she greeted me with a mix of nerves and excitement. She held up a pregnancy test, her hands shaking. "I haven't looked yet. I wanted to wait for you." We sat together in silence as she checked the test. Her face crumpled when she saw the result. "It's negative," she whispered. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or devastated. Amanda started crying, and for a moment, I almost reached out to comfort her. But then she said something that made my blood run cold. "I was hoping it would bring you back to me," she admitted, her voice barely audible.
Ist det här sant?
"Are you serious? You were using the possibility of a pregnancy to manipulate me." She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't mean it like that. I don't know how to make this right, Jake. I miss you." That was the final straw. I realized then that Amanda wasn't going to change. No matter how much I wanted to believe in her, she would always find a way to drag me down. The moment Amanda admitted she'd used the idea of a pregnancy to try and win me back, something in me snapped. All the hurt, all the betrayal, all the hope I'd clung to, it evaporated. I finally saw her for who she was. Someone who would always prioritize her own needs, no matter the cost to those around her. "I can't do this anymore," I said, standing up. "You need help, Amanda. Real help. But I'm done being your safety net." She broke down, sobbing and begging me to stay, but I didn't waver this time. I walked out of her apartment and never looked back. The divorce was messy, as I expected it to be. Amanda dragged it out for months, trying to guilt me into reconciling or leveraging Ethan to get her way. It was the hardest thing I've ever been through, but in the end, I got shared custody of my son. That was all that mattered to me. Once the dust settled, I focused on building a life for myself and Ethan. I moved into a small house close to work and found a routine that worked for both of us. Therapy helped me unpack the trauma of my marriage and taught me to recognize the red flags I'd ignored for so long. As for Amanda, I don't know much about her life now. She still tries to stir up drama occasionally, but I keep our interactions strictly about Ethan. I've heard rumors. Friends have told me she's been in and out of relationships, still chasing the validation she craves. Part of me feels sorry for her, but I've learned that it's not my responsibility to save her. These days I feel free. It's not always easy being a single dad, but Ethan gives me purpose. He's my anchor, my reason to keep going even when life feels overwhelming. And when I look at him, I'm reminded of why I made the choices I did. If I've learned anything from all of this, it's that love isn't enough to sustain a relationship. Trust, honesty, and respect. Those are the real pillars of a lasting bond. Without them, love is just a word. To anyone reading this, my advice is simple. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, don't ignore it. And never let anyone make you feel like you're crazy for wanting to be treated with respect. Thank you for staying with me. This crazy journey is finally over and I'm ready for what's next. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more interesting stories. And leave a comment with what you would do in this situation. See you in the next videos.